morning, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well out there. Everybody's staying safe out there. I'm making this video for a couple reasons. Most obvious is that in the last week that we've had some tragedy. Our society, our country, it's not in a good state right now. Obviously, the death of George Floyd is the first tragedy that started off this chain of events, which is a true tragedy and that deserves justice. But this tragedy has been continued in the destruction of our cities, and I feel an obligation to speak out against what's happening. Both the violence against people of color and against our own cities. And the reason I want to say something about this is because there's so many voices on our social media. There's so many voices out there that are honestly like bullies that make you feel that if you don't say things exactly the way they want you to say things, and if you don't support every single thing that's going on in the protests that are going on, then that makes you an enemy. That makes you a racist. That puts you on the side of those that condone the killing of George Floyd. Or at least that's what these people, these posts make you feel, is that if you don't sound exactly like them, you're the enemy. And I feel that that's dishonest. I feel that we should be having a discussion about what's going on in our country without the fear of being labeled a racist, without the fear of being labeled anti-protester, Black Lives Matter. I feel like we have the right to speak up whenever we see injustice, and that's what I see. I see that what's going on in these protests, not that I don't support peaceful protests, but what I cannot condone, what I cannot justify, is the destruction of our cities. It's not right. There's no way around it. And I do not condone at all the killing of innocent people by police officers. And that's what is wrong with society today. And I feel like we need to get to the heart. We need to have a discussion about what's going on here. And I think I can articulate it in a certain way that makes it make sense about what's going on here. What's at the heart of these injustices. And we can do it by comparing the injustice committed by certain police officers and the injustice committed by those protesting, those same police officers. On the one hand, you have rioting. There's riots in our city. People are destroying our communities. People are stealing. It's wrong. It has nothing to do with justice. People are destroying stores and stealing from stores, destroying buildings, destroying vehicles. I just saw a video of a man trying to defend his own car from the destruction of the protesters, the rioters. I wouldn't equate the protesters with the rioters. This man had a bow and arrow, and he's trying to defend himself from people trying to destroy his property. And what these people did was jump him. They basically jumped him. 12, 15 people beating on him. Eventually his car was flipped over and burned to the ground. That's not right. And I know what you're thinking. Look, that's not all the protesters. That's not what we represent. But we can't turn our eyes from it. We can't say that that is not us. That is just a few of us that are the bad actors. But if we're turning a blind eye to this, that's injustice in itself. In fact, that's the very thing that we're protesting. That there are individuals that are committing injustice, that we're not willing to make them accountable for what they're doing. And I'm talking about police. I'm saying that there are bad actors in the police and the law enforcement that do intentionally hurt bad people. Yet those in law enforcement turned a blind eye to those individuals. If you look at it, it's the same situation. We are saying those things are outside of the norm. Those are not who represent us. But we don't do anything to hold them accountable. Neither the protesters are doing anything or saying up or are afraid to speak up against those that are looting and rioting because we fear we're going to be rejected. We fear we're going to be seen as outsiders. We fear we're going to be condemned by our own peers. So we say nothing, and we let the injustice continue to happen. And it's like, can't you see that's the problem? Both on the police side and on the protester side. We are turning a blind eye to the injustice that's happening right before us. And nobody's willing to speak up about it. That's what needs to happen. And you can and both sides have the exact same defense for their reasons for turning a blind eye. I've heard it said directly to me, you know what? It's inevitable what's happening to our cities. What's happening in these protests. It's inevitable. I've even heard it said it's necessary for people to listen to our cause. Destruction of cities and stealing from our community is unavoidable and sometimes even necessary so they can hear us. That's just a justification for immoral behavior, and don't you think that that's exactly what needs to be? That's the problem on both sides, because the police officers, the law enforcement could say the same thing. You know what? It's unavoidable that these things happen. We are put into these situations where that will happen and it's unavoidable. Is that the excuse that you want to accept? I don't want to accept that. I don't. And both protesters and police will say the same, can say the same things. You know what? You don't walk in our shoes. You don't know what it's like to live as a person of color. You don't know what it's like to live as a police officer. And yes, both of those realities do have, both of these communities have a target on their back. Both live with the full knowledge of having a target on their back. And I want people to realize, don't you think that police officers have as much fear of walking in our streets as any other person of color? Don't you think that society has painted a target on the back of police officers? The same people that enlist themselves to protect us, to maintain law and order in our cities, don't you think they walk around knowing that this could be the day that they die? Knowing that they're going into the heart of trouble? Knowing that they could die this very day? You don't think they walk with the same target on their back as people of color? It's unfortunate that we are holding them to higher standards that we hold to ourselves. It's all unjust. It's all unjust. And I don't think that this is the answer. I think what's happening is a tragedy. What's happening to our communities the division that's happening in America, it's not right, and it will not be fixed by turning a blind eye to the real problems that are happening, both with the police and with our protesters and with the rioters. You can't turn a blind eye to the wrong things that are happening right before you, and you cannot fear speaking up about it out of fear that your community or your group of friends are going to see you as just against the movement, against what we stand for. And you know that both protesters and police are fighting for the same thing. We're on the same side. We want justice, and we want to protect our fellow citizens. We have the same goal here, but we make the same mistake, that we're turning our blind eye to the injustice that's happening right next to us. We're not speaking up about what we see happening in our peers, and those who fight with us, and those who do injustice. We're not saying anything about it. And that's why I'm speaking up, because somebody has to say that we are turning a blind eye to injustice on both sides. So the answer that I promote is to hold each other accountable. Whenever a police officer that you know is bad, that you know is taking liberties with people, you need to speak up, and you need to say something without any fear of being chastised. And on the same level, protesters, if you see people looting and destroying and burning, you have a responsibility to speak out against that, because that is not what we stand for in this country. The answer is to hold each other accountable, and at the end of the day, it's hold yourself accountable. Hold yourself accountable for what you do, and hold your peers accountable for what they do. If we can't do that, we're never gonna find peace in this society. I hope you have a great day.